Welcome back, everyone, to another live from COP28 here at the Global Decarbonization Accelerator. My name is Reed Blakemore, Director of Research and Programs at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. And this is yet another opportunity to hear from the wide array of stakeholders from civil society, private sector, and policy to think through who's here at COP with us, how are we building an agenda for climate action and energy transition, and importantly, how do we carry the lessons and ideas that we take at this COP forward into the next year. I'm joined today by Rhian Kelly, Chief Sustainability Officer at National Grid. Rhian, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So walk me through a little bit. Our audience is, ranges from geographies, from levels of expertise. Talk to us a little bit about National Grid, what you do there, and importantly, how that's all brought you to COP28 this year.
Yeah, so National Grid, we operate in the UK and in New York and Massachusetts in the northeast coast of the USA. We do a couple of things. We run transmission lines, so transporting electricity, almost like the highways of electricity. We do that in England and Wales, in the UK, and then we distribute it as well. So we do the wooden poles into people's homes in a bit of the UK as well. And then in Massachusetts and New York, we do a bit of transmission. We have the wooden poles into people's homes, and we also do gas distribution. So we take gas into people's homes as well.
And so you're kind of doing all the different nitty gritty big pieces of the energy transition. What's brought you to COP? What are you seeing going on here?
Well, I guess in part, the reason we're here is because we have managed to decarbonize a lot of our power system in the UK, and we still have a grid that hasn't fallen over. So we have a story to tell and expertise to share. And full well in the US, that is also true, particularly decarbonizing the grid, but also we've managed resilience in the changing climate, and we've managed through some really incredibly tough storms, particularly thinking of the storm over Christmas in New York State last winter. So I think there's an opportunity for us to talk about our experience and our expertise and what we've learned decarbonizing the grid. But we're also here because it's an opportunity to link to the agendas that are being discussed. So one of the things that I'm really interested this year is the commitment hopefully gets made by the end of COP28 to treble the capacity of renewable energy capacity by 2030. Because in order to do that, you need grids. You need grids to transport the renewable energy into people's homes and businesses. So there's a role for us then to be part of that conversation, but to talk about, well, how do we manage our supply chains? How do we manage the regulatory regime about that to bring in the investment? How do we bring through green jobs and green skills? How do we make sure as we build new assets that we bring communities with us? So I think as sort of policymakers or negotiators are having their conversations, it's for business to be here and say, well, this is how we'd make it happen. And could you think about this in your conversations?
But you mentioned this, when you're talking about ultimately being the company who's providing power into somebody's home and this idea of servicing communities. One of the features that we've seen, not just in this COP, but in previous COPs is, the imperative of establishing a just and equitable energy transition. Could you reflect a little bit on that piece of the COP agenda and where you see a company like National Grid playing a role?
Yeah, I think, that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time at COPs talking about, sort of green jobs and skills, community benefits, just and equitable transition. And I think it's really interesting to be here because what you get is such a diverse perspective and views, and it really helps us then think through, well, how do we do it in our business, in our communities? And it's tough, particularly I think in the States, in the Northeast. How do we make sure that people feel that they can be part of the transition, and it isn't just for the people who can pay for electric vehicles and pay for solar panels? How do we make sure that some of our disadvantaged communities are also part of this journey and also make the transition? And how do we make it easy for them? And how do we support them with heating assistance through the winter months? But also how do we enable them to have more energy efficient homes, which we do a lot of in the US, and we've done quite a lot of in the UK as well. So one of the things I'm quite proud of at National Grid is we set aside 65 million last winter to support both in the UK and the US with some of our customers and communities struggling with the energy crisis and the increased energy costs, and just helping people get by the winter months. But at the same time then looking at, well, actually at the same, can we help them with energy efficiency measures? Can we make their homes retain energy so they're not wasting money on bills for energy they're not using? So I think and I just find being here and having a global perspective on that. And the other thing I talk about is green jobs and skills, and how do we give people an opportunity to think about the skills in the energy sector? How do we bring people into the energy sector who haven't maybe always thought, well, energy is a place to go? And, we don't have all the answers. This is an immense transition ahead of us. So we kind of need fresh ideas and fresh ways of thinking, and we need sort of everybody's perspective. So we work quite hard at National Grid through our Grid for Good programs to bring in a more diverse new talent, to bring in people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, but to sort of get them into our industry and to help us think through how we get to solutions.
We're doing a lot of learning at this COP. We're doing a lot of ideation. We're building community. How do we take that forward into the next year to make this an action COP?
Yeah, so I think it's businesses like us continuing the investment, continuing to, and the renewable energy, should the tripling of renewable energy capacity by 2030, should that get written into the text, then as grids, we've got loads to do to enable that. So it's continuing with our investment plans, it's continuing to work with our supply chains to take a more strategic, long-term approach. We're also thinking, particularly in the UK, how we work with local communities to show that they're going to benefit from hosting new infrastructure. And then other opportunities as we think about supply chains, think about hosting new infrastructure for those communities where we can perhaps create centres of excellence and bring skills through. We can show local populations that there's a skills and jobs opportunity. We've committed to reduce our emissions to align to a 1.5 degree pathway. So I think keeping the 1.5 degree 5 degree target alive through this COP is also really important, because we'll want to play our part, but we want to see everybody else playing their part as well.
And I think, again, it's not only you saying, hey, this is the target that we're going to hit. It's about, we're going to build the community and engage ourselves in the conversation and in the grid itself in a way which advances that target. Rhian, you always come to COP with such a number of ideas. This is our second time we've seen you at the COP. Thank you again for joining me today, and best wishes for the rest of these 2 weeks.
Thank you. Good luck to you guys.
We'll be doing a number of these interviews throughout the rest of these 2 weeks at COP28 here at the Global Decarbonization Accelerator. Until next time, we'll see you.